What's up guys, it's Brad from The Architect here. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down one of the live action shots in our new Spyderfy add-on for Blender trailer, and then showing you very easily how you can add void crawl systems utilizing the Spyderfy add-on to your scene. These techniques are fairly simple and you can get results fairly quickly using these techniques. Anyways guys, let's get started. Here we are inside of Blender. This is the final scene setup for one of the live action shots in our Spyderfy trailer. On the right side we have the camera viewpoint for our render in addition to our background plate, and in the left side of our view here we just have our scene set up here so we can work a little bit more easily. And setting up the scene was fairly simple. What we did is we imported our footage into Blender in the motion tracking tab here, and then we selected a bunch of track points and 3D tracked our scene so that we can add all of our live action elements to the scene more seamlessly. I'm not going to cover the 3D tracking in this specific video. However, we do have a 3D tracking tutorial on this channel, so I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to learn more about how to track your footage in Blender so that you can integrate CGI with your live action footage. So after tracking our 3D camera, we needed to set up some general geometry that was similar to our live action shot. So what I've done here is I've added a basic ground plane to our scene, and I've made it a shadow catcher, but I also wanted to make sure that the spiders that were going to be crawling on this surface were getting some fairly accurate environmental reflection. So what I've done here, since our ground is a darker color, I've also made the material for this ground plane a darker color as well. So even though it's a shadow catcher and we're not actually going to be seeing the material here, we want the light that's going to be bouncing off the ground plane surface to be accurate to the live action shot. So we've just made it a little bit darker to match the ground in our live action shot. I'll go ahead and turn up the opacity on our live action shot so we can see it a bit better here for now. But as you can see, it's a lot darker, so that's why we've also made the material for this ground plane dark. The next thing that I did to kind of recreate our live action shot in the computer was add some of these reflective planes here. So what I did is I took some screenshots from our live action shot and I imported them as images on planes and then turned them into emission planes, as you can see here. And what that's going to do is it's going to help create some more realistic reflections on the CGI that we're going to render. So as you can see here, if I go to object properties here, as you can see, I've turned the camera rays off, which means that this plane is not actually going to be rendered for our scene. However, all of the other properties are actually going to interact with the other objects that we are going to render. So in other words, this will just be an emission plane that's lighting our CG spiders and beetles. However, it's not actually going to show up in the live action shot. So I'll go ahead and just go to rendered view real quick, and then I'll turn on camera view. And as you can see here, it's just a screenshot of our live action footage. And what it's going to do is it's going to help create some specularity on the bugs in our foreground when we render it to make the lighting a lot more realistic. And one of the reasons I did this is because the main source of light in this live action shot is actually the light coming from this building in the scene. So I wanted to try to implement that and light the CG spiders in a way that actually made sense, in addition to our night HDRI that we've used in the world settings. So that's one trick we used to create a more seamless integration of the CGI with the live action shot. In addition to this main background emission plane of the screenshot from our live action footage, I've just duplicated it one more time to emit light a little bit higher in the scene to create some more reflections on our CG spiders. So that's essentially what these two background plates are. And then we've just added our ground plane, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that we made that darker so that the reflections would be a lot more accurate. And if you want it to be even more accurate, you could add a texture of a street or something to make the reflections a lot more, accurate. But I think this worked pretty well, so I just went with it. In addition to these emission planes, I've also added a very basic top light for our spiders here in the foreground of the shot. And then I've also used a black plane behind our camera to create a little bit more shadows by the camera and make it a little bit more cinematic and create a little bit more shadows in our scene. This technique of adding a black solid by the camera to create shadow is called negative fill, and I've covered this in a previous video, but pretty much what we're doing is we're just taking away the ambient light that's coming from the camera so that we have a more shadowy and moody scene. Alright, so this is essentially our environment setup here. Now let's talk about the void system that we've added through Spyderfy, and then I'm going to show you how we can add our own and create a result fairly quickly. So I'm just going to go back to layout mode here. And in this Boyd system that we've added through Spyderfy are some black widows and some beetles. And we've added a goal to this system as well so that they are more likely to crawl toward the woman in the scene here. And to get the bugs to crawl along the surface of our plane here, I've turned the ground plane into a collision object for the Boyd's particle system. And to do that, I've used the selected geometry to collision button here, which does just that. It turns whatever you've selected into a collision object so that all of the Boyd's particles can interact with it and crawl across it. So that's what I've done to create this scene here. As you can see here, we've used lots of Boyd's particles for this specific setup. If we go under the Blender Particle Properties tab here, you can see that we've used 8,000 particles. And then also, in addition to changing the number of particles, I also increased the scale randomness for some more variation, and then also dropped down the max land speed so that these spiders would crawl a little bit slower toward our subject to make these spiders and beetles crawl a little bit slower toward the subject in the scene. Finally, one of the last things I did for this specific shot is actually animate the goal empty throughout the course of our scene. So as you can see here, we've placed the goal empty by the woman in the scene, and then throughout the course of the scene, we've actually animated it to follow her so that the bugs are always crawling toward the person in the scene here, and it just creates a much more organic looking result so that the bug system is a little bit more integrated into our footage. Alright, so to finish off this video, I'm going to delete our existing bug system and add a new one and show the process from scratch. So I'll go ahead and just select our bug system and delete it, and then we will also select our bug system goal here and delete that as well. And we'll just start here from our live action shot at frame 180 and add some bugs to our scene crawling toward her. So the first thing we're going to do is just choose the bugs we want to add to the scene. Instead of adding black widows and beetles, I will deselect the beetles and we'll just use black widows and the bird-eating spider instead. And now I will select where I want to add the bug particle system to. So I'll just select over here behind our camera and then name our particle system. So we'll call it widows and bird. And now we'll just we'll choose the amount of bugs here. I might do something like we'll choose maybe 600 just for the sake of this tutorial, and then click on add bug system. And now, as you can see here, we have a particle emitter emitting our bug particles. However, they're not going to move very much because our goal object is right on top of it. So let's go ahead and select that goal object here. It's just a empty in the scene here, as you can see. And before I move it, since we have a lot of tracking points over here that we might get confused with the empty shape here, is I'll just go to object data properties while our bug system goal is selected. And then I'll change the display as to sphere like we did before. And now it's just a little bit easier to see amidst all of these tracking points from our 3D camera track. So I'll just move our goal over to the woman walking in the scene, something like this. And we've already turned our ground plane into a collision object. But again, all you have to do this is just select selected geometry to collision. So I'll just do that again just for the sake of the tutorial. And as you can see here, what that does is it just adds some collision effects to that object so that the bugs will interact with it. And right off the bat, you can see that now that we've moved our goal object in front of our camera, if we play through the scene, the spiders are going to start kind of generally crawling toward our goal object here. So what we're going to do is we are going to just scale up our particle emitter. So I'll scale it up on the x-axis and rotate it just like we did in the final shot here. And this is looking pretty good. We'll try to put it right above our ground plane here. And now we will go to the Blender Particle Properties tab here, and we will bake the Boyd system. And now, as you can see here, already we have a pretty nice looking result. If we play through our scene, we can see the spiders generally crawling toward our empty here. There's some glitches going on over here. That's just because the Boyd's particle system is not the smartest particle system, and they're getting kind of hung up on the edge of this building here. So to do that, there are several fixes, but for this specific tutorial, I'm just going to dial back the speed of our particles so that they don't reach that ledge as quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'll just delete the bake, and we'll go to movement here under our physics panel. And I will just decrease the max land speed to 2 for this tutorial. And then I also will bring down the land acceleration to 0.25 just so they don't move quite as quickly. Now we'll just go back up to the cache and bake it again. And I may have slowed it down a little bit too much as they're not really going by the camera very quickly here. So I'll go back and delete the bake and then go back to max land speed, or maybe go back to the acceleration and increase the acceleration to 0.4, max land speed to 2.6, and then bake it again. And now, as you can see, our spiders are crawling by our camera toward our empty, and things are looking pretty good. Again, this is just a very quick setup here. There are a lot of different things you can experiment with. You can change the size of your emitter. You can add multiple bug systems so that you have bugs crawling from different directions toward your subject and everything. But again, this is a super simple setup. One more thing I might do to add a little bit more realism is again increase that scale randomness so that these spiders aren't all the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'll delete the bake again, and then I'll go down here to renders and increase the scale randomness to maybe 0.75. And now, as you can see, we have a little bit more variation in our spider size. I might increase that variation even more, maybe something like 0.9. And I'll go back to camera view on this side. And I also might increase the number of particles in our Boyd system. So I'll increase this to maybe 2000 and bake it. And this is looking pretty cool. As you can see, we have a mixture of smaller spiders in addition to our larger spiders that we had before. And now, as you can see here, if we play through it, lots of spiders crawling toward our empty. And of course, as I mentioned before, you can animate your empty to move so that your particles move accordingly and you can get different results. And yeah, this is a nice final result fairly quickly. As I mentioned in some previous videos, these assets are all fully textured and ready to go in both Cycles and Eevee rendering engines. As you can see here, if we go to rendered view really quick, you can see that even up close, they're super detailed. Really nice work again by the artist that we've worked with, Elliot Faze. I'll post a link to his work in the description below as well. But really nice work here. Great detail in both Cycles and Eevee. This is just the Black Widow model, but as you can see, we can also zoom into the bird-eating spider as well, which also looks super good up close. And again, we can switch to Eevee rendering just like that, and you can get a really nice real-time render as well, depending on what you're going for in your final render. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. As always, feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions in the comment section below. Let us know what you'd like to learn next, and I'll see you guys next time.